In the heart of Chicago, where the wind carries secrets through the towering buildings and the city never truly sleeps, a love story was about to become a medical nightmare that would haunt everyone involved. This isn't your typical true crime tale of violence or betrayal. This is something far more disturbing, a case that would make seasoned doctors question everything they thought they knew about the human body and the horrors it could conceal. What happened on that fateful March evening in 2023 would become the stuff of medical legend, whispered about in hospital corridors and discussed in hushed tones at medical conferences. It's a story about love, trust, and the terrifying discovery that sometimes the most dangerous predator isn't human at all. It's something living inside you, growing, feeding, waiting to be discovered in the most horrifying way possible. Damon Richards was living the American dream, or at least his version of it. At 32, this electrical engineer had traded the economic struggles of Detroit for the promising opportunities of Chicago 3 years earlier. His parents, who had sacrificed everything to put him through college, couldn't have been prouder. Damon was methodical, dedicated, and successful. The kind of man who color-coded his calendar and never missed a deadline. Life in Chicago had been good to him. His modest apartment in the South Shore neighborhood was nothing fancy, but it was his. Weekend basketball games with friends, steady work with a respected engineering firm, and a social circle that included college buddy Jerome Thompson kept him grounded and content. But like most men his age, Damon was missing something. Someone to share his carefully ordered life with. That someone walked into his world on a warm June evening in 2022 at Jerome's birthday celebration. Her name was Tamara Lewis, and from the moment she smiled at him across the crowded room, Damon knew his orderly life was about to become beautifully chaotic. Tamara was 29, a school counselor whose passion for helping troubled teenagers was evident in every conversation. When she spoke about her work, her eyes lit up with a fire that made everyone around her want to be better people. She had the kind of laugh that was infectious, the kind of warmth that made you feel like you'd known her forever after just 5 minutes of conversation. "So you're the famous Damon," she said when Jerome finally introduced them, her smile reaching her eyes in a way that made his heart skip. "Jerome's told me all about you." "All good things, I hope," Damon replied, suddenly self-conscious about the small coffee stain on his shirt, a morning mishap he'd forgotten about until this moment. "Mostly," Tamara teased, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Though he did mention you're a bit of a workaholic." "I prefer dedicated professional," Damon countered, matching her playful tone. Their conversation that night flowed like water, covering everything from childhood memories to dreams for the future. By the time the party wound down, Damon had Tamara's number in his phone and a coffee date planned for the following weekend. It felt natural, comfortable, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. Their first official date at a cozy cafe near Lake Michigan turned into a second at an art gallery downtown, which led to a third at a jazz club that Tamara recommended. Before either of them fully realized it, they were seeing each other regularly, building something that felt both thrilling and secure. 3 months in, they had the conversation that many couples navigate carefully. Exclusivity. For both Damon and Tamara, it felt like the natural next step. They were falling in love, and neither wanted to complicate that with other people. Tamara had always been refreshingly honest about her life. She told Damon,
"If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video."
About her past relationships, 2 serious boyfriends in college, a few casual dates since graduation. She was equally open about her health, mentioning that she'd struggled with irregular periods and severe menstrual cramps since her teenage years. "It runs in my family," she explained one evening as she curled up on Damon's couch with a heating pad pressed against her abdomen. "My mother had the same issues." The doctor says it's just one of those things some women have to deal with. Damon, caring and concerned as always, had suggested she get a second opinion, but Tamara had dismissed the idea with a wave of her hand. "I've been dealing with this since I was 16, she said. "Trust me, if there was something seriously wrong, I'd know by now." Damon didn't push the issue. Everyone had their health quirks, after all. He occasionally suffered from migraines that would knock him out for an entire day, and Tamara never questioned how he managed those. It seemed only fair to extend the same courtesy. As summer melted into fall, and then winter, their relationship deepened and strengthened. They met each other's families over Thanksgiving, exchanged heartfelt gifts at Christmas, and welcomed the new year with a kiss at Jerome's annual party. By February 2023, they were seriously discussing moving in together once Tamara's lease expired in July. Everything was perfect. Life was good. Love was real. Until March 10th, 2023, when their world shattered in the most unimaginable way. The day started like any other. Damon woke at 6:30, went for his usual morning run through the neighborhood, showered, and headed to the office. He had a packed schedule, including a crucial meeting with a potential client that could secure a major contract for his firm. Knowing he might be late for their dinner plans, he texted Tamara to give her a heads up. "No problem," she replied quickly. "I'll cook at my place instead. Come over whenever you're finished." It was one of the many things Damon loved about Tamara, her flexibility and understanding nature. She got it. She understood that his career was important and that sometimes work ran long. She never made him feel guilty about it, never complained when plans had to change. The client meeting went exceptionally well. By 8:15 that evening, Damon was standing outside Tamara's apartment door with a bottle of her favorite red wine and excellent news to share. When Tamara opened the door, she looked stunning in a simple black dress, her hair pulled back in an elegant bun. The apartment was filled with the rich aromas of garlic and herbs. "You look beautiful," Damon said, leaning in for their usual greeting kiss. "And you look exhausted," Tamara replied with a gentle smile, taking the wine and leading him inside. "Long day, but a productive one," Damon said, loosening his tie with a satisfied sigh. "Remember that potential client I mentioned? We got the contract." "That's incredible." Tamara's excitement was genuine, her happiness for his success evident in her bright smile. "This definitely calls for a celebration." Dinner was perfect. Tamara had made her grandmother's pasta recipe, complete with homemade sauce that had been simmering all afternoon, fresh garlic bread, and a crisp salad. They talked about their days, laughed over a story Tamara shared about one of her students, and finished the entire bottle of wine between them. As they cleared the dishes together, the atmosphere shifted subtly. A meaningful glance, a gentle touch, and soon they were kissing in the kitchen, the forgotten dishes abandoned on the counter. "Stay tonight?" Tamara asked softly, her voice carrying an invitation that Damon had heard many times before. "Of course," he replied without hesitation. They moved to the bedroom with the comfortable familiarity of two people who had been together for 9 months. Their physical relationship had always been passionate yet tender, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. As things progressed naturally, Tamara reached into her bedside drawer and handed Damon a condom. They had always been careful about protection. It was a mutual decision they'd made early in their relationship, born out of respect for each other and responsibility for their futures. Damon didn't think twice about it. The packaging looked normal. The brand was one they'd used many times before, and in the heat of the moment, detailed inspection wasn't exactly a priority. Their lovemaking was everything it had always been, an expression of their deep connection and growing love. Afterward, they lay wrapped in each other's arms, talking softly about an upcoming concert they had tickets for and making plans for the weekend. Life felt perfect, complete. "I should freshen up," Damon said eventually, placing a gentle kiss on Tamara's forehead before padding to the bathroom. It was there, under the harsh fluorescent lighting of Tamara's small bathroom, that their perfect evening took a turn into absolute horror. As Damon went to dispose of the condom, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just an odd shadow, or maybe a trick of the unflattering bathroom lighting. But as he looked closer, his stomach lurched with a sickening realization. There, on the used condom, were tiny white organisms, moving, wriggling, alive. Damon blinked hard, convinced his eyes were playing tricks on him. Maybe he'd had more wine than he thought. Maybe it was just the lighting creating strange shadows. But when he looked again, they were still there, small, pale, undeniably moving creatures that made his skin crawl with revulsion. His immediate reaction was pure, primal horror. He dropped the condom into the toilet and flushed it away, then scrubbed his hands under scalding water until his skin was red and raw. His mind raced with questions that had no acceptable answers. How was this possible? The condom had seemed perfectly normal when he'd put it on. Where had these things come from? Looking at his reflection in the mirror, Damon saw his own face pale with shock and growing dread. He needed to tell Tamara, but how do you even begin such a conversation? How do you explain something that shouldn't exist, shouldn't be possible? Taking several deep breaths to steady himself, Damon returned to the bedroom where Tamara was casually scrolling through her phone, blissfully unaware that their world was about to implode.
If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video.
"Everything okay?" she asked, noticing his expression immediately. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Damon sat heavily on the edge of the bed, trying to find words for the impossible. "Tamara," he began, his voice strained with stress. "The condom we just used, there was something wrong with it." Tamara frowned, setting her phone aside. "What do you mean, wrong?" "There were organisms on it. Moving ones." He couldn't bring himself to say the word maggots out loud. It was too horrifying, too unreal. "What?" Tamara sat up quickly, clutching the sheet to her chest. "That's impossible. Those condoms are brand new. I just bought them last week." "I know what I saw," Damon insisted, his voice rising slightly with the stress of the situation. "And it wasn't normal. These were living things." Tamara's expression shifted from confusion to genuine concern. "Are you sure it wasn't just, I don't know, some kind of reaction with the lubricant or something?" "No," Damon said firmly. The image burned into his memory. These were alive. They were moving. A heavy, uncomfortable silence fell between them. The implications of what Damon had discovered hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If there had been organisms on the condom after use, where had they come from? The logical conclusion was too disturbing to contemplate fully. "Maybe we should go to the emergency room," Damon suggested after a long moment. "Both of us, just to be safe." Tamara hesitated, fear flickering across her features, then nodded slowly. "Okay, let me get dressed." As they hurriedly prepared to leave, a terrible thought occurred to Damon. If the organisms had been on the condom after their intimate encounter, the most logical source was... He couldn't finish the thought. It was too horrible to consider. Chicago Memorial Hospital's emergency room was relatively quiet for a Friday night, which felt like a small blessing in what was rapidly becoming a nightmare scenario. Damon and Tamara sat in the waiting area, both lost in their own troubled thoughts, the physical space between them on the plastic chairs feeling much wider than it actually was. After giving their information to the intake nurse, a process that required them to explain their situation in hushed, embarrassed tones, they were told to wait for a doctor to become available. "I feel fine, you know," Tamara said after they'd been waiting for about 20 minutes, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "I don't have any symptoms of anything." Damon nodded, trying to be reassuring while battling his own growing dread. "That's good. Maybe it's nothing serious." But deep down, he knew that finding living organisms on a used condom was never going to be nothing serious. Something was very, very wrong, and the thought made his skin crawl with anxiety. After what felt like hours, but was actually only 40 minutes, a nurse finally called Tamara's name. Damon started to get up to accompany her, but the nurse explained that they would need to be examined separately. "We'll come get you when it's your turn, sir," the nurse said kindly but firmly before leading Tamara away down a sterile corridor. Left alone with his thoughts, Damon's mind went to increasingly dark places. He tried Googling possible explanations on his phone, but the search results were either too technical to understand fully or too disturbing to contemplate. He put his phone away and tried to focus on the muted television in the corner, which was playing some late-night talk show, but concentration was impossible. Meanwhile, Tamara was being led to an examination room where she met Dr. Patricia Williams, a compassionate woman in her mid-50s with kind eyes behind stylish glasses and graying hair that spoke of years of medical experience. "Miss Lewis," Dr. Williams said, consulting the intake form, "I understand you're here because of some concerning discovery after intercourse. Can you tell me more about what happened?" Tamara explained what Damon had told her, feeling a mixture of embarrassment and growing fear with each word she spoke. "And have you experienced any unusual symptoms yourself?" Dr. Williams asked professionally. "Any discomfort, unusual discharge, odor, or itching?" "No," Tamara replied, then hesitated. "I mean, I get cramps sometimes, but that's normal for me. I've had irregular periods since I was a teenager, and occasionally there's a smell, but I always just thought that was my natural odor. Every woman's different, right?" Dr. Williams nodded, making careful notes. "When was your last gynecological examination?" Tamara's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "It's been a while. Maybe 2 years? I've been really busy with work, and honestly, I hate those appointments. They're so uncomfortable." "Many women feel that way," Dr. Williams said with understanding. "But they're important for exactly this reason. I'd like to perform an examination now, if you're comfortable with that." Tamara agreed, and after changing into a hospital gown, she underwent what would prove to be the most important medical examination of her life. Dr. Williams was gentle and professional throughout, but Tamara could tell from the doctor's increasingly concerned expression that something was seriously wrong. "Miss Lewis," Dr. Williams said as Tamara got dressed again, her voice careful and measured, "I'm very concerned about what I found during the examination. There are clear signs of a significant infection, possibly quite severe. I need to take some samples for immediate testing, and we're going to need to do an ultrasound as well." Tamara felt a cold wave of terror wash over her entire body. "What kind of infection?" "I don't want to speculate until we have more definitive information," Dr. Williams replied diplomatically. "But I need to be honest with you. The presence of what your boyfriend described, which we call larvae, is not normal under any circumstances and indicates a very serious condition that requires immediate attention." The word larvae made Tamara feel physically ill. She had something inside her body that was producing larvae. The thought was so revolting, so impossible to accept, that her mind almost rejected it entirely. "What about Damon?" she managed to ask. "My boyfriend, is he at risk?" "We'll examine him thoroughly as well," Dr. Williams assured her. "But if you've been using protection consistently as you indicated, his risk should be significantly lower. Right now, my primary concern is you and getting to the bottom of what's happening." The next several hours passed in a blur of medical procedures. Blood was drawn, cultures were taken. and an ultrasound revealed abnormalities that prompted additional imaging via CT scan. Through it all, Tamara felt disconnected from reality, as if she were watching these things happen to someone else entirely. Meanwhile, Damon was examined by Dr. Michael Foster, a young physician who checked him thoroughly for any signs of infection or parasites. Finding nothing immediately concerning, Dr. Foster prescribed a precautionary course of antibiotics and advised Damon to follow up with his primary care doctor within a week. "What about Tamara?" Damon asked, worried about how long she'd been gone. "How is she doing?" "I'm afraid I can't share her medical information," Dr. Foster explained professionally. "But you can wait for her in the main waiting area." It was nearly 2 o'clock in the morning when Tamara finally emerged from the examination area, looking pale and emotionally drained. Damon stood immediately, going to her side with obvious concern. "What did they find?" he asked, searching her face for answers. Tamara's eyes filled with tears that she'd been holding back for hours. "They're admitting me to the hospital. They found something, an infection, maybe worse. They need to do more tests before they know for sure what we're dealing with." Damon felt his heart sink into his stomach. "I'll stay with you through all of this." Tamara shook her head weakly. "They said it could be a very long time before they have definitive answers. You should go home, get some rest, shower, and change clothes. They have my phone number. They'll call when they know more." "I'm not leaving you here alone," Damon insisted firmly. They eventually reached a compromise. Damon would go home to shower and change, then return in the morning with some of Tamara's personal belongings to make her hospital stay more comfortable. As they said goodbye at her hospital room door, Damon hugged Tamara tightly, trying to project strength and reassurance he didn't feel. "Everything's going to be okay," he promised, hoping desperately that it was true. But as he left the hospital and stepped into the cold Chicago night air, he couldn't shake the terrible feeling that nothing would ever be okay again. Damon barely slept that night. He tossed and turned, his mind replaying the evening's horrifying events in vivid, disturbing detail. When his alarm went off at 7, he was already awake, staring at the ceiling and dreading what the new day might bring. After a quick shower, he packed a bag with some of Tamara's belongings that she kept at his apartment: comfortable clothes, her favorite moisturizer, a book she'd been reading, and returned to the hospital. Tamara was awake when he arrived, sitting up in bed and picking at a breakfast tray of toast and fruit. She looked better than she had the previous night. Some color had returned to her cheeks, but there was a weariness in her eyes that Damon had never seen before. "Hey," he said softly, setting the bag down and kissing her forehead gently. "How are you feeling physically?" "Fine, actually," Tamara replied. "Mentally, I'm a complete mess, but physically, I feel normal." Damon pulled a chair close to the bed and took her hand in his. "Have the doctors told you anything more?" Tamara nodded, setting aside her half-eaten toast. "Dr. Williams came by early this morning with some initial test results. They think I have something called myiasis." "Myiasis," Damon repeated, unfamiliar with the medical term. "It's a condition where fly larvae, maggots, actually grow inside the human body," Tamara explained, her voice taking on a clinical tone, as if she were discussing someone else's condition. "Apparently, it's extremely rare in the United States, especially in the location where I have it." Damon felt a wave of nausea, but fought to keep his expression neutral and supportive. "How did you get something like that?" "That's the terrifying part," Tamara said, meeting his eyes directly. "Dr. Williams said it usually happens in tropical climates or to people with poor hygiene or open wounds, but I don't fit any of those categories at all." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "They think it might be related to the menstrual problems I've been having. You know how I told you I've had issues since I was a teenager? Dr. Williams thinks I might have had an undiagnosed condition all this time, that created an environment where this infection could develop and thrive. Damon tried to process this information, but it seemed surreal. What kind of undiagnosed condition? They're not completely sure yet. They want to run more comprehensive tests. Tamara's voice wavered slightly. But they mentioned something called uterine myiasis, which is apparently so rare that there are only a handful of documented cases in medical literature worldwide. The clinical terms and medical explanations did nothing to diminish the absolute horror of the situation. Tamara had been living with fly larvae inside her body, possibly for months or even years, without knowing it. The thought made Damon's skin crawl with revulsion and sympathy. "I should have gotten proper medical attention sooner," Tamara said, tears forming in her eyes. "All those times I had severe pain or noticed strange odors, I just dismissed it as normal variation. If I had gone to a doctor earlier, maybe this could have been prevented." "This is absolutely not your fault," Damon said firmly, squeezing her hand. "You had no way of knowing something like this was even possible." But even as he offered reassurance and support, disturbing questions nagged at him. How long had this condition been developing? Had she really not noticed any symptoms beyond what she considered normal menstrual irregularities? And most unsettling of all, how many times had they been intimate while this horrifying condition was actively progressing? As if reading his thoughts, Tamara said quietly, "Dr. Williams asked detailed questions about our intimate relationship. When I told her we always use protection, she said that's probably the only reason you didn't get infected too. The condom, as horrible as the discovery was, it actually protected you from something much worse." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The very thing that had revealed Tamara's nightmarish condition had also been Damon's salvation. "When will they do the additional tests?" Damon asked, trying to focus on practical next steps. "Later today. They're bringing in a specialist from the university hospital." Tamara hesitated before adding, "They want to document my case for medical literature. Apparently, it's that unusual and significant." Damon nodded, understanding the medical importance, while hating that Tamara had to endure being the subject of such intense professional scrutiny. They spent the morning together, trying desperately to maintain some sense of normalcy. Damon connected Tamara's laptop to the hospital Wi-Fi so she could check work emails and stay connected to her regular life, and they watched cooking shows on the small television mounted on the wall. But the specter of the diagnosis hung over every interaction, making even these simple activities feel strained and artificial. Around noon, Dr. Williams returned with another physician, an older man with a distinguished salt and pepper beard who introduced himself as Dr. Christopher Hayes, an infectious disease specialist from the university. "Miss Lewis," Dr. Hayes said in a measured, professional tone, "I've reviewed your case extensively, and I'd like to perform a more thorough examination if you're comfortable with that." Tamara nodded her consent, and Damon excused himself to give them privacy. Heading down to the hospital cafeteria where he sat picking at a sandwich, he didn't want while calling his boss to explain that he needed several days off for a family medical emergency. He also texted Jerome, telling him that Tamara was in the hospital, but without providing any details. Those would be for Tamara to share if and when she chose to. When he returned to Tamara's room an hour later, she was alone again, staring out the window at the gray Chicago skyline with an expression he'd never seen before. "What did the specialist say?" Damon asked, resuming his seat beside her bed with growing apprehension. Tamara turned to look at him, her expression complex and deeply troubled. "It's confirmed uterine myiasis. And they found something else, too." Damon waited, his heart pounding with dread. "I have a condition called endometriosis," Tamara continued. "It's where tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside the uterus in other places. It can cause severe pain, heavy, irregular periods, and apparently, in extremely rare cases, It can create an environment where other things can survive and grow. Things like fly larvae. How is that even possible? Damon asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. Tamara nodded grimly. Dr. Hayes thinks a fly must have laid eggs during one of my periods when I was using a tampon. The eggs hatched, and because of the endometriosis, they found places where they could actually survive and develop instead of being naturally expelled by my body. The clinical explanation did absolutely nothing to diminish the horror of the situation. If anything, understanding the mechanism made it worse. Damon felt a mixture of revulsion and profound sympathy for what Tamara was going through. "What's the treatment?" he asked, focusing on what mattered most, getting Tamara healthy again. "Surgery," Tamara replied, her voice breaking slightly. "They need to remove all the larvae and treat the infected areas. And they want to address the endometriosis at the same time, which might involve removing part of my uterus." Her voice broke completely on those last words, and Damon understood the devastating implication immediately. Such surgery could significantly affect Tamara's ability to have children in the future. "When?" he asked quietly. "Tomorrow morning," Tamara said. "They want to move quickly to prevent any further complications or spread of the infection." Damon nodded, trying to project strength and unwavering support while internally grappling with a rapid series of shocking revelations. "I'll be here every step of the way," he promised. "Through everything." Tamara managed a small, grateful smile, but Damon could see the deep fear in her eyes. Fear not just of the surgery and the condition itself, but of what all this might mean for her future and for their future together. As afternoon turned to evening, Tamara's parents arrived from Milwaukee, having driven through the night as soon as they heard their daughter was hospitalized. The reunion was intensely emotional, filled with tears, tight hugs, and the difficult task of explaining the situation in terms that conveyed the seriousness without causing unnecessary panic. Damon stepped back respectfully, giving the family space to process together, but Tamara's mother, Ruth, made a point of hugging him tightly before they left for the night. "Thank you for being there for her," Ruth whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For taking her to the hospital when this happened. Who knows how much worse this could have gotten if you hadn't discovered it when you did." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. The discovery, as traumatic as it had potentially saved Tamara's life. Late that night, after Tamara's parents had gone to a nearby hotel and the hospital had settled into its quiet nighttime rhythm, Damon sat beside Tamara's bed, holding her hand as she drifted in and out of sleep, the pre-surgery medication making her drowsy. "Are you disgusted by me?" she asked suddenly, her voice small and vulnerable in the dimly lit room. "What? Absolutely not," Damon said immediately, squeezing her hand firmly. "Never." "I wouldn't blame you if you were," Tamara continued, not meeting his eyes. "I'm disgusted by myself, by what's been happening inside my body without me knowing." "Look at me," Damon said gently, waiting until Tamara raised her eyes to meet his. "This is a medical condition, a horrible, rare medical condition. It's not your fault, and it doesn't change how I feel about you. Not even a little bit." Tamara searched his face carefully, looking for any sign of insincerity or hidden revulsion. Finding none, she nodded slightly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "About the surgery, about what they might find, about what comes after." "I know," Damon replied, his voice steady and sure. "But you're not going through this alone. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." It was a promise made in a hospital room at midnight, under circumstances neither of them could have imagined just 24 hours earlier. But it was genuine and heartfelt. As Tamara finally drifted off to sleep, Damon silently renewed that promise to himself. Whatever came next, however difficult the road ahead might be, he would be there. They would get through this together. Saturday morning arrived with a soft pink sunrise that seemed incongruously peaceful, given the gravity of what lay ahead. Damon, who had spent another uncomfortable night in the recliner beside Tamara's bed, woke to the familiar sounds of nurses changing shifts and the distant beeping of medical equipment throughout the hospital. Tamara was already awake, scrolling through her phone with an intensity that suggested she was trying to distract herself from thoughts of the impending surgery. "Morning," Damon said, stretching to relieve the stiffness in his back from another night in the chair. "Did you manage to sleep at all?" "A little," Tamara replied, setting her phone aside. "Enough, I guess." A nurse came in to check Tamara's vital signs and informed them that Dr. Hayes and the surgical team would be by shortly to discuss the procedure one final time before taking her to pre-op. "Are your parents coming?" Damon asked after the nurse left. Tamara nodded. "They're on their way. Mom texted me a few minutes ago. They're in the parking garage." They sat together in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts and anxieties, until Dr. Hayes arrived with Dr. Williams and another physician who was introduced as Dr. Angela Martinez, the gynecological surgeon who would be leading the operation. "Miss Lewis," Dr. Hayes began, "we've reviewed all your test results and imaging studies extensively, and we've developed a comprehensive surgical plan. Dr. Martinez will explain the specific details." Dr. Martinez, a confident woman in her early 40s with short auburn hair and a reassuring presence, stepped forward. "We'll be performing what's called a laparoscopic procedure, which means we'll make several small incisions rather than one large incision. This approach is much less invasive and typically results in faster recovery and less scarring." She continued, explaining that they would meticulously remove all the larvae and infected tissue, as well as address the endometriosis by excising the affected areas wherever possible. "Regarding your reproductive organs," Dr. Martinez said, her tone carefully measured, "our primary goal is to preserve as much healthy tissue as we possibly can. However, depending on exactly what we find during surgery, we may need to remove portions of the uterine lining, or, in a worst-case scenario, we might need to perform a partial hysterectomy." Tamara's face paled at these words, but she nodded to show she understood the implications. "What are the chances that she'll still be able to have children?" Damon asked, the question that was weighing heavily on both their minds. Dr. Martinez's expression softened slightly. "It's simply too early to give you definitive odds. If we're able to preserve most of the uterus, and the fallopian tubes aren't significantly damaged by the infection, then pregnancy may still be possible in the future. But I want to be completely honest with you, there will very likely be challenges, and you might need assistance from reproductive specialists down the road." Tamara reached for Damon's hand, gripping it tightly as she processed this information. "Do you have any other questions about the procedure?" Dr. Hayes asked. "How long will the surgery take?" Tamara inquired. "We've scheduled 3 hours," Dr. Martinez replied, "but it could be shorter or longer depending on exactly what we find when we get in there." "And recovery?" "You likely stay in the hospital for 2 to 3 days after surgery, followed by approximately 4 to 6 weeks of recovery at home before you can return to normal activities," Dr. Martinez explained. After addressing a few more questions about anesthesia and post-operative care, the doctors left to prepare for the surgery, promising to return within an hour to take Tamara to the pre-operative area. Ruth and Harold Lewis arrived shortly after, bringing a small bouquet of cheerful flowers and worried smiles that didn't quite hide their deep concern for their daughter. The family spent the next hour together, making careful small talk that deliberately avoided the frightening reason they were all gathered there, until a nurse arrived to escort Tamara to pre-op. "We'll be right here when you wake up," Ruth promised, kissing her daughter's forehead tenderly. Harold, a man of few words under the best of circumstances, simply squeezed Tamara's hand firmly and nodded, his eyes conveying all the love and support he couldn't vocalize. When it was Damon's turn to say goodbye, he leaned close to Tamara and whispered, "You've got this. You're the strongest person I know. And remember what I promised, I'm not going anywhere." Tamara managed a small but genuine smile before she was wheeled away, leaving Damon and her parents to face the long, anxious wait ahead. The surgical waiting area was designed to be as comforting as possible, with soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and a selection of magazines and books, but nothing could truly alleviate the tension that filled the hours as they waited for news. Ruth knitted steadily, her needles clicking in a rhythmic pattern as she worked on what appeared to be a baby blanket, a project she'd started months ago for her niece, she explained, though the timing now seemed cruelly ironic. Harold paced the room restlessly, occasionally stopping to stare out the window at the city below or check his watch, while Damon alternated between scrolling mindlessly through his phone and attempting to focus on a book he'd brought but couldn't seem to get past the first chapter. 2 hours into the surgery, Jerome arrived, having texted Damon earlier asking if he could stop by to offer support. He brought fresh coffee for everyone and provided a quiet, steady presence that helped ease some of the overwhelming tension in the room. "How's she doing?" Jerome asked Damon quietly when they stepped away from Tamara's parents to refill their coffee cups. "We don't know yet," Damon replied, exhaustion evident in his voice. "The surgery is still ongoing." Jerome hesitated before asking his next question. "And what exactly is she having surgery for? Your text yesterday was pretty vague." Damon paused, unsure how much to share. Tamara hadn't specifically asked him to keep her condition private, but it felt like something that should be entirely her choice to disclose when she was ready. "It's extremely complicated," he finally said. "A very rare infection related to some underlying health issues she didn't know she had. I think it's better if Tamara explains it herself when she's feeling up to it." Jerome accepted this explanation with an understanding nod. "Fair enough. Just know that I'm here for both of you, whatever you need." "Thanks, man," Damon said, genuinely grateful for his friend's unwavering support. "That means everything." When they returned to the waiting area, Dr. Williams had arrived to provide them with an update. The surgery was progressing exactly as expected, she informed them, and Tamara was stable throughout. Dr. Martinez had successfully removed all the infected tissue and was now addressing the endometriosis complications. "How much longer?" Ruth asked, setting her knitting aside with obvious anxiety. "Another hour or so," Dr. Williams replied reassuringly. "Dr. Martinez will come speak with you personally as soon as the surgery is completely finished." The final hour of waiting was perhaps the most difficult. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as they all watched the clock on the wall with growing impatience and worry. Finally, nearly 4 hours after Tamara had been taken to surgery, Dr. Martinez appeared in the waiting room, still wearing her surgical cap, but having removed her gown and gloves. They all stood immediately as she approached, their faces anxious and desperate for news. "The surgery went very well," Dr. Martinez began, and a collective sigh of relief filled the room. "We were able to successfully remove all the infected tissue and larvae. The infection was quite significant, but it was completely contained, which is excellent news for her long-term prognosis." "And the endometriosis?" Damon asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. Dr. Martinez's expression became more serious. "It was more extensive than we initially thought, based on the imaging. Tamara has what we classify as stage 4 endometriosis, which means the disease has spread significantly throughout her pelvic cavity. We excised as much as we could safely remove, but some areas were too close to vital organs and blood vessels to address surgically. She paused, allowing this information to sink in before continuing with the most crucial details. As for her reproductive organs, we were able to preserve most of the uterus, though the lining was significantly damaged by the infection. Unfortunately, one fallopian tube was beyond saving and had to be completely removed, but the other appears to be intact and healthy, as are both ovaries. So she can still have children? Ruth asked, hope clearly evident in her voice. It's definitely possible, Dr. Martinez replied cautiously, but it will likely be challenging. I would strongly recommend consulting with a fertility specialist once Tamara has fully recovered from this surgery. The news was decidedly mixed, better than the absolute worst-case scenario they had all feared, but not as positive as they had desperately hoped. Still, Tamara was alive, the horrific infection was completely gone, and there was still hope for her to have children in the future if she wanted to. When can we see her? Harold asked, speaking for the first time since the doctors had arrived. She's in recovery now, Dr. Martinez explained. Once she's fully stabilized and the anesthesia begins to wear off, we'll move her to her regular room.
If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video.
A nurse will come get you when she's ready for visitors, but I should warn you, she'll be very groggy and disoriented, and she may not remember much of your visit today. With that, Dr. Martinez excused herself to check on her other patients, promising that Dr. Williams would be available throughout the evening if they had any additional questions or concerns. As predicted, it was another full hour before a nurse came to inform them that Tamara was back in her room and could receive brief visits, one person at a time to avoid overwhelming her. Ruth went first, followed by Harold, each spending about 15 minutes with their daughter before returning to the waiting area with reports that Tamara was awake but extremely drowsy from the anesthesia. When it was finally Damon's turn, he entered the room quietly, struck by how small and vulnerable Tamara looked in the hospital bed, connected to various monitors and in 4-drip. Her face was pale, her hair pushed back from her forehead, and her eyes were only half open. "Hey," he said softly, taking the familiar chair beside her bed. Tamara's eyes opened a bit more, and she managed a weak but genuine smile. "Hey," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube that had been used during the surgery. "How are you feeling?" Damon asked, taking her hand gently in his. "Like I've been hit by a truck," Tamara replied, wincing slightly as she shifted position. "But the nurse said everything went really well." "It did," Damon confirmed. "Dr. Martinez said they removed all the infection completely." Tamara nodded slightly, then asked the question Damon knew was foremost on her mind despite her grogginess. "And the other thing, the endometriosis?" Damon hesitated, not wanting to overwhelm her with complex information while she was still recovering from anesthesia. They addressed it as best they could, but maybe we should discuss all the details when you're feeling more alert. Tamara seemed to accept this, her eyes drifting closed again. "You'll stay," she murmured. "As long as they let me," Damon promised without hesitation. He sat with her until she fell asleep again, then quietly left the room to give her parents another opportunity to see her before visiting hours officially ended. That night, after Tamara's parents had returned to their hotel and Jerome had gone home, Damon stayed in the hospital, alternating between dozing uncomfortably in the recliner in Tamara's room and watching her sleep peacefully, reassured by the steady beeping of the monitors that indicated she was stable and recovering well. It had been just over 48 hours since they had discovered the horrifying truth about Tamara's condition, and in that short time, their lives had been completely transformed. Yet, as Damon watched Tamara's chest rise and fall with each steady breath, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude mixed with his exhaustion. The discovery had been absolutely traumatic, the diagnosis shocking beyond belief, and the surgery intensive and frightening. But Tamara was alive, the nightmarish infection was completely eliminated, and they had a clear path forward, uncertain though it might be. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, pain management for Tamara, detailed discussions about long-term treatment for the endometriosis, and eventually difficult conversations about what all this meant for their future together. But for now, in the quiet sanctuary of the hospital room, with the city lights twinkling outside the window and Tamara sleeping peacefully, Damon allowed himself a moment of genuine hope. They had survived the worst of it. The medical mystery had been solved, the threat eliminated, and justice had been served in the form of expert medical intervention that had saved Tamara's life. The rest they would face together, one day at a time. 6 months later, Damon and Tamara stood in the kitchen of their new apartment, the one they had planned to move into together before their world had been turned upside down. Tamara was preparing dinner, moving with the same grace and confidence she'd always possessed, though Damon knew she carried invisible scars from her ordeal. The recovery had been long and challenging. There had been additional surgeries to address remaining endometriosis, months of physical therapy, and ongoing consultations with specialists. But Tamara had faced each obstacle with remarkable strength and determination. More importantly, their relationship had not only survived the crisis, but had been strengthened by it. They had seen each other at their most vulnerable, and had chosen to stay committed to building a future together. "The fertility specialist called today," Tamara said casually as she stirred pasta sauce, though Damon could hear the carefully controlled emotion in her voice. "Oh." Damon set down his wine glass and gave her his full attention. "She thinks we have a real chance," Tamara continued, a smile spreading across her face. "It might take some assistance, and it won't be easy, but she's optimistic." Damon crossed the kitchen and wrapped his arms around her from behind, holding her close. "That's incredible news." "I know we haven't talked seriously about kids yet," Tamara said, leaning back against him. "But after everything we've been through, I want you to know that whatever happens, I'm grateful for this life we're building together." "Me too," Damon replied, meaning it completely. As they stood together in their kitchen, preparing a simple dinner and talking about their future, it was hard to believe that just months earlier they had been living through a medical nightmare that had challenged everything they thought they knew about love, trust, and the resilience of the human body and spirit. The case had indeed become the stuff of medical legend. Dr. Hayes had presented their findings at international conferences, and the successful treatment protocol had been published in prestigious medical journals, helping other doctors around the world recognize and treat similar rare conditions. But for Damon and Tamara, the most important outcome wasn't medical fame or contribution to scientific knowledge. It was the simple fact that they had faced an unimaginable crisis together and had emerged stronger, more committed, and more grateful for each ordinary day they were given. Justice had been served not through a courtroom verdict, but through the skill and dedication of medical professionals who had refused to give up until they had answers and solutions. The real victory was in the quiet moments like this one, cooking dinner together, planning for the future, and celebrating the ordinary miracle of survival and love. The horror they had lived through would always be part of their story, but it would not define their future. They had proven that even the most shocking and disturbing circumstances couldn't destroy what they had built together, and that knowledge gave them strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In a world full of unsolved mysteries and unanswered questions, their case stood as a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying threats come from places we never expect, but that with courage, medical expertise, and unwavering support from those we love, even the most nightmarish situations can have hopeful endings. If this story of medical mystery, unwavering love, and ultimate triumph over unimaginable circumstances moved you. Please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Your support helps us bring these remarkable cases to light and share the stories of ordinary people who face extraordinary challenges with courage and determination.